Hey guys, welcome to the Tyrant Network podcast. I'm your host, Corey Frederick, and I'm off the mat today with Gene Zannetti. Gene, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Corey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I know we've kind of been chatting a little bit about, the services that you guys offer with Wrestling Mindset. I've heard a lot about you over the years. I coached for 20 years. Now I'm strictly a tournament director. And really, I never took advantage of your services. I know kids that have or coaches that have, but really wanted to learn more about you as a person and kind of how you got to where you're at today. And then definitely want to hear a ton about Wrestling Mindset. So just, maybe give us a little bit of background on yourself and kind of let everybody who you are.
Absolutely. I mean, usually the same thing on every wrestler, coaches, and parents' mind is how do I stop losing to guys I should beat? And how do I stop underperforming? And obviously, my brothers and I, we all grew up with that right through the ranks, wrestling from elementary school, high school, right through college. We were nationally ranked all Ivy League wrestlers at the University of Pennsylvania. My brother Jeff, my business partner, and I. Our youngest brother Greg was at Rutgers. He was a two-time academic All-American, ranked as high as sixth in the country. He's now a priest. And our whole life was, how do you beat wrestling being such a holistic sport? How do you be the very best spirit, mind, and body? And one of the things we noticed, one of the gaps was, we're a lot of times losing to guys we should beat. We're underperforming. You're doing well in the practice room or at club, and how come I'm not quite doing the same thing when I wrestle in a match? And it's one of the most frustrating things in the world where, you feel like quitting or, you feel burnout and all that, and a lot of it's mental. So for me, when I learned about sports psychology, I said, this is the most interesting thing in the world. And I mean, I didn't realize it was a scientific field and that you could actually learn how to overcome these mental blocks that you're having. So I went to school. I wound up getting 2 master's degrees, one in exercise science, sports psychology, the other in clinical psychology. I became a school psychologist. And I started doing this back in 2008, working with athletes one-on-one as well as teams. And then over time, it's grown. And at this point in time, we're the #1 wrestling specific sports psychology program anywhere in the world. It started off with just me providing the services, but now we have just under 100 mindset coaches across the country that are servicing people in all sports. Wrestling is our bread and butter, but mindset is mindset. And our primary goal is using wrestling as a vehicle to build mental skills and virtue for the rest of their life, right? Mindset is mindset. So it starts in our sport. We all want to win. We all want to have that edge, but very few people are working directly on their mindset. Like the question I always ask is, what percentage of wrestling is mental and physical? Everyone says it's 90% mental. And then when you ask them about their training, 90% physical. I'm not a math guy, but you see there's a gap there. So we try to fill that gap.
So why don't you talk a little bit about like where you grew up, where your wrestling background, just, a little bit of history on you as a wrestler or as a kid, kind of coming up through the ranks, and then we'll kind of chop it up, with the college
Sure.
and mindset.
Sure. So we grew up in Edison, New Jersey, not far outside of Rutgers. And, I wound up taking third in the state of New Jersey. Both of my younger brothers took second. And we just saw that, the gap is that small to reach your goals. I mean, the difference is usually 1 point between reaching your goals or having your heart ripped right out of your chest and having your dreams destroyed and kicked around on the ground, right? So, I mean, that's why we knew it was very mental. But we grew up like pretty much any other family, playing different sports. We played baseball, football, wrestling, just athletic family. It was a lot more actually outdoor sports at the time in terms of, outside with your friends. It wasn't as organized back when we were competing as it is now. Now there was very few wrestling clubs when I started wrestling, very few. And now in New Jersey, they're almost every 10 minutes you could find a wrestling club with very good coaches and very good partners all over the place. So yeah,
What high school did you go to?
JP Stevens in Edison.
Okay.
So Edison's a big town. South Edison goes to Edison High. North Edison goes to JP Stevens. Both are public schools.
Now, how old are you?
41.
Okay. So I'm 40. I mean, I want to say when I was growing up, there were school teams, but there really wasn't any wrestling clubs. Now I'm in Delaware, but did you train at a club or did you just train at your school?
Well, once I started getting serious about the sport of wrestling, I started going to CJA, Central Jersey Alliance. That's run by Gene Lazark. He's still coaching over there, and that was the primary, really the main club, the only club that myself and both of my brothers went to. In fact, my first one-on-one coach was Gerard Perez, one of your athletes, and he took me under his wing when I was in 8th grade, and he became not only a wrestling coach, but a friend, an older brother. And interestingly about that is, we would have a lot of talks. We not only would we wrestle, but we would talk about a lot of things. So I didn't realize it was kind of like priming the pump for thinking about the mental side of the sport. It wasn't done formally. We weren't going into like deep sports psychology, but it just got me, I guess, used to thinking and talking about the mental aspect of the sport. So yeah, and then by the time high school came around, my brothers and I, then we basically went full in with wrestling outside, discontinuing our other sports after freshman football and going all in. That was a large part to Gerard saying, "Hey, we got to get serious. We need to take it to the next level." So we're forever indebted to him.
Well, how much do you weigh? Just out of curiosity, since you were giving up some of the other sports.
I'm probably like about 192. I could be.
Oh, are you that big?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's a lot of it's muscle.
Yeah.
I could be a little bit more trim also. Got to cut out the snacking. But
So,
high school, I wrestled 140. College, I was 157. Both of my brothers wrestled at 174 in college.
and then you said you went to UPenn?
Yeah, I went to Rutgers for 3 years, then transferred to UPenn for my last two.
Okay. And then at what point in college did you decide that you wanted to focus on the psychology part of things?
So it hit me in high school. I took an elective. So my dad's an accountant. So I always just figured I'd always be like my dad. I'm named after my dad. I'll just follow my dad's footsteps. So I took an accounting elective as a senior in high school. And one of my friends also recommended I take psychology. He said it's very interesting. And I hated accounting. I wasn't very good at it. I'm not the most organized person in the world, by far. And then, but on the other hand, my psychology class, I remember running like a mock counseling scenario, and it was like a total disaster. The kids weren't taking it serious, but I left that class feeling like a bolt of lightning hit me, where I said, if these people were taking it serious, I think I really could have helped them. I want to be a psychologist. So that just hit me right there as a senior in high school. Then I was probably a freshman freshman in college at Rutgers, knowing I wanted to be a psychologist. I'm at Borders bookstore, and I was in the self-help department, like looking at different books, and I see a book, or maybe I guess it might have been sports, because it was a sports psychology book titled "Fight Your Fears and Win." I had never heard of sports psychology before, but I flipped open the
Yeah.
book and I said, "This is interesting. Like they're giving you strategies to build confidence, relax under pressure, build mental toughness, all the things I was trying to do as a wrestler. It gave you like a game plan how to do that." So at that moment, I said, I want to be a sports psychologist. And then as a sophomore, I believe, I think I was a sophomore in college. I read a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert
Oh,
Kiyosaki. One of my teammates, Chris Ressa, who is one of the older guys on the team, he said, "Hey, Zannetti, you got to read this book." And I said, "Well, okay, my teammate's telling me to do it. He was a good wrestler." So I read the book and I said, "I want to own a business in sports psychology." So the picture started getting clearer and clearer over time. And then when it came time to open a business, my brother and I partnered together. We didn't want to say sports psychology because that doesn't sound very cool. I didn't have a problem with it, but my brother, being more the business guy and much more down to earth, he's, "Get it doesn't sound cool. Let's not use those words." And we read business books saying niche marketing is the way to go. So rather than helping all sports, which we do, we've helped national champs, all Americans for all different sports, all different teams and businesses, Fortune 500 companies. We said, let's niche it to wrestling. And that's when we started Wrestling Mindset. So it's like a path that God was leading us down, and it got clearer and clearer over time. But you're just running, the ball is thrown to you. You're running hard, and it gets clearer over time where we were moving. So 2012, we formalized the company. But the reality was I was working with wrestlers and teams on a regular basis since 2008.
so when you came out of college, did you jump right into Wrestling Mindset, or did you have like a normal day job for a little while before you?
I was a school psychologist for a little while. Well, first of all,
Okay.
when I jumped out of school, I was almost 30 years old, because I went from Penn to Springfield College. I got my first master's degree, exercise science, sports psychology. I was helping coach the college team over there as like a volunteer graduate assistant. And then after that, I went to get a second master's degree in clinical psychology and became a school psychologist. So, several years in the making there. And then I came out as a school psychologist. My brother, Jeff, was a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch. And then once we started building up clients, we started building the business behind the scenes. We spoke at the National Wrestling Coaches Convention. That was kind of like a big kick for us to start things off, and figured a few things out business wise. And then we left our jobs. And that was, pretty stressful thing for our parents. I mean, if you know any Italians, you don't have to look for advice. Advice finds you. And we heard it. I mean, thank God our parents were always very supportive, but hey, you guys have Ivy League degrees and you're leaving your job. Well, we had a plan. We had mentors. We knew what we were doing, at least to some extent. So we're very blessed that, our parents supported us and we were able to move on and start the business. Like I said, formally in like whatever it was, 2012, 2013.
So probably more from out of curiosity from a business perspective is how many years did you have a day job and that you were building wrestling mindset before you decided to jump ship and go all in?
About 6 months.
Oh, is that all?
So because Jeff, right out of school, he went and he got a job. So Jeff was in the business world for, I don't know, but he's 2 years younger than me too. So he was probably working for like 2 or 3 years. Like I said, financial advisor at Merrill Lynch, and he jumped ship. But we were building on the side. We had clients before we were able to leave. So
in the beginning though, and this is probably a new concept, was it hard to convince or persuade people to invest or spend money on mindset coaching?
yeah, I mean, it always is because it's not cheap, but because it's a specialty service. Like this is an advanced specialty. It's not just like a lot of things. You see a lot of things pop up nowadays with mentoring, which is great. I'm all for mentoring. Like what Gerard was for me was a mentor. And that's irreplaceable because that's what got me kicked off into the sport. But as far as knowing the ins and outs of sports psychology and how to build confidence, relax under pressure, what are the tools? What are the exercises? Like anyone could tell you what to do to build stronger arms or stronger legs. You know the exercises, bench press, squats, deadlifts for the different muscle groups. But what are the exercises to build confidence? What are the exercises to relax under pressure? How do you take a kid who's not very aggressive in matches and then make them aggressive? How do you take a dog that doesn't bite and turn him into a dog that bites? That's the specialization that we really needed. So that's like I'm saying, that was something that we have to make that clear that is a specialty service. And you think of like a strength coach or a technical coach. Well, mindset, this is the gift that keeps on giving. Once you're done with wrestling, you're going to be using these lessons just as much, maybe even more as a parent, as a spouse, in your career, now that passing those lessons on to your children. So if your mindset's not there, you're in big trouble for the rest of your life. And we do unfortunately see a lot of wrestlers, I'm sure you've seen too, who were very successful in their career. But on the other hand, then when it comes to life, they didn't quite translate that lesson. They should be star success in their business, in their career, but they didn't translate that lesson. Like I would say that's probably got to be a big part of your success, that you have the mindset, the mental and emotional stuff that a lot of people, maybe they had it in wrestling, but they didn't translate it to their future careers. So we're very big on making that connection. So I think when you're looking at it as in terms of strength training for the mind, and that these are lessons that continue and that your kid will need, you see that it is something that is worth the value, right? It's not just what you're paying for, it's the value. And then there's of course the cost of, what's the cost of not getting mindset training? Kids burning out, wanting to quit, not translating those lessons to life, and just the eternal what if. What if I would have had the mindset training? And I could tell you, almost everyone says, I wish I had this back when I was competing. I'm exhibit A of that. I don't even like to think about it because it's only going to make me upset. But you don't want to have that what if. You don't want to live with those kind of problems.
Yeah. So what do you think? And again, it's probably more business oriented, but back in the day, there was always, now youth sports have changed over years, but like you would think that, wrestling was a blue collar sport, or there's no money in wrestling or things like that. But, I know you have a wrestling background, so it's probably a no brainer, but you could have went into lacrosse, right? You could have went into something where it's a little bit more of an affluent sport. Was there ever, a concern or any nervousness going into our sport and just, maybe not making the money you need to run a business or, to support your family?
Again, being blessed to be in New Jersey where there's wrestling clubs. I mean, you need to know where your market is, right? And at the end of the day, you need, there's the wrestling parents. You have to be where the wrestlers' parents are. So all serious wrestlers, they go to wrestling clubs and they go to tournaments, right? So we need to have good relationships with all the club owners and tournaments, because that's where our market is. And in New Jersey, thankfully, being such a pretty popular sport here, and so many wrestling clubs, if it wasn't for being in our state, it would have been much harder to start the business. But When I got started with all this, when I started approaching wrestling clubs, I mean, that was the only place. I wasn't speaking at different sports. So we were getting clients immediately from wrestling. So that was never really like a big concern. I think the bigger concern was more, what do we do in the off season? Because it's such a seasonal business. And we still have a lot of people. We have hundreds of kids that are on the program all year round, which they all should be. But the reality is a lot of people leave after the season because unfortunately, a lot of them are still looking at it as a magic pill or quick fix, which it's really not. It's just like your
Yeah.
technique or your strength. You do it year round. So, yeah, that was the big concern. What do we do more in the off season to build it up? So then we did dip into other sports, and we've had a lot of success. We worked with national champs in lacrosse and in soccer, and then like I said, businesses. But it's just wrestling still has always remained the bread and butter. So the time, money, and effort that it takes to advertise in other sports, we found that as it stands right now, it's a lot better for us to just double down on wrestling because we're nowhere near tapping out that market.
So because you went niche, at least with your name, that when you're in other sports, do you have a different name or are you just wrestling mindset? I'm a lacrosse guy and hey, you got to call wrestling mindset.
We say winning mindset. We actually had a
Winning,
logo.
okay.
So wait a minute. So we built it out exactly what we did with wrestling. Because at first we tried to break it. Once we got bigger in wrestling, then we said, now let's try this in all other sports. So we built out lacrosse mindset, tennis, golf, soccer, hockey, you name it. Like we have we have pretty much all the sports covered. And we had our curriculum, which is wrestling specific, which as far as I know, there's no other wrestling specific sports psychology program anywhere in the world. We said, let's do the same thing now with soccer and football and baseball and so on. So I had people that I was connected with that were able to extract the essence of the lesson, translate it into that sport. We had logos built out, marketing materials. So, I mean, we have Instagram and Facebook pages for all those different sports. And then the blanket company we were calling Winning Mindset. So we still have that. Overall, I would just keep it simple. I just call it Winning Mindset for other sports just to make it simple. But like I said, we do have the logos and the curriculum built out for all different sports. So if someone was listening who had a kid that plays tennis, we have an awesome tennis specific program.
So like, let's just say if I'm tennis or lacrosse, your mindset coaches, do they do all sports or do you have some people that have played those sports specifically to try to be on the same wavelength as them or something?
Overall, we do have some coaches that have specialized in that have played other sports also. That's the one thing that's difficult when you're employing so many people. We tried hiring people in all different sports, and we found it's better to take the people who are better mindset coaches. The better mindset coaches can take all sports. But if we just find someone who played a sport just to nominally say we have a golfer, that's been a non-starter for us. That hasn't worked out very well. I mean, the gold in the wrestling program is also that not only is it a wrestling specific curriculum, but you're speaking with wrestlers directly. But I also think wrestling is just such a unique sport that if you've wrestled, you could kind of relate to the struggles in different sports. Whereas I don't know how much it actually goes the other way around. Like I really do believe a wrestler could relate to a golfer or a tennis player or a soccer player. That those sports probably would not be able to relate to wrestling because it's just so holistic in terms of strength, conditioning, weight class, nutrition, mindset. It's so personal. So our wrestling, long story short, or shortening a long story would basically be, yeah, that we stick with the wrestling coaches overall for all sports. And the curriculum is built out enough where if our mindset coach sees, oh, they're working with a golfer, here's the lessons and the golf specific language is right there for him.
Yeah. So what is either the youngest, let's say, student you have / what is your minimum age that you'll accept?
Oh, we have as young as 6 that are on our weekly group Zoom calls. So we've twice a week group Zoom calls. That's basically like the no-brainer option that anyone who's competing in sports in any kind of serious level, they should be doing the twice a week group Zoom calls because again, it's only $99 a month and they're getting twice a week mindset lessons. So a lot of younger guys elect to start with that. And even though they're not absorbing everything in terms of rationalizing or reasoning, they are hearing certain words and concepts and they're learning this is good to focus on, that's bad to focus on. So at the young age, it's memorization and planting the seed. I would say most of our clients tend to fall in the middle school, high school, and college. But again, we have a lot of guys in elementary school, and we've worked with literally dozens of MMA, UFC fighters.
So is there like the different packages or like tiers that you have? So what are the options they could do? You mentioned group, but I thought that it would just all be individual. So
Yeah.
Is there different packages, or is it that they just have the ability to jump on groups if they're doing the individual thing? Like how are you set up?
Yeah, so the group is, like I said, that's made to be the no-brainer option. Really, the bread and butter is the one-on-one mindset training. We have weekly and bi-weekly options.
Okay.
Those are the main things people do. Now we do have our best of the best, our elite service is our 30-day mindset transformation. That's for people who are really looking for full immersion training where they're looking to get the best results in the shortest amount of time. So, of course, that program is much more expensive. And instead of it being just weekly sessions, they have unlimited sessions for the entire month with one of our. So the way we break it down, if you're working with a bi-weekly coach, that's one of our coaches from our 100 coach army, you could call it, so to speak. Then if you're in our weekly program, you're getting one of our 20 Navy SEALs, if you want to call it that. And then if you're on our 30-day transformation, you're working with Rambo. So it's Army, Navy SEALs, Rambo. Not putting any of the
Yeah.
armed services above any others, but just to kind of make it sense in people's heads. So if they're going to work with Rambo pretty much every day for 1 month, that's obviously a much more premium service. So, I mean, all of our programs are great. It just depends. Do you need results in a short amount of time? How long you're looking to do the program. Even if someone did the 30-day transformation, they should still be doing mindset training year round, even if it's only at the biweekly level, because different situations come up and confidence and motivation, they don't stay stable. You see, with even some of the best guys, you lose a match, things don't go so well, your confidence starts dropping down, motivation starts dropping down. So there's always situations that come up that it's beneficial for them to have a mindset coach right there by their side to take them through, whatever they're going through. Because a lot of times it's, you have your coach on the team, and your coach on the team is very good, but let's face it, your coach on the team has to, by definition, focus on the best interest of the entire team. And then the same thing with the club. The club owner ultimately has to think about, how do I keep this club afloat as a business owner, and how do I, there's different club duels. They got to think about how different kids play into the lineup. With a mindset coach, the whole point there is they're in your corner. So they're going to give you the best advice, not what weight class is best for your team, but what is best for you, given your long-term goals.
So does it kind of start off with like, hey, here's where I'm having problems, or do you guys have like a curriculum you just kind of go through as well to touch on different things? Because sometimes you don't know what you don't know, but like when you start, and then obviously I'm sure they could share with you, like, I get nervous here, or I have anxiety or whatever, but how do you kind of get into that program, or how do you feel out where to go with that kid?
Yeah. So our Rambo mindset coaches, they're off the book in the terms of we have a structured program for how we would take them through this. For most people, I'll tell you that in a minute. But the point is, our Rambo mindset coaches, that 30-day transformation, they're the best of the best. So they get in there and they start working with them right away off the beaten path, because they're trying to put out a fire right now that's got to be solved in 1 month, basically. But the standard way we take people through the program, most people, most of the time, the way you want to really look at mindset training, it's really 3 steps. 1, you have to identify negative mental patterns. 2, you need to break those negative mental patterns. And then 3, you need to develop new positive mental patterns, right? So identify, break the bad, add good, create good, right? So the first thing we have them do is we take them through a mindset checklist. And that's about, I don't know what is the third, I guess about 20 questions, assessing different mental muscles. Just like there's different muscles in the body, we break it into different mental muscles. And we see where they strong, where they weak. That gives us a picture right away in the first session, what they really need to work on most. So now we have a general picture of the kid, and they're very wrestling specific questions, just so we have an idea of really where they at. And they're harder questions to get them to think. Then we do our next 10 lessons. It's all built on self-knowledge. So there's some of our best wrestling specific exercises, and it's done that way intentionally, because right away, one of the downsides that I've seen with general sports psychology, psychiatry, therapy, or counseling was it's much more open-ended. Like, hey, tell me what's going on. Most kids, they don't respond to that. All right. And most wrestlers are very hands-on and practical and down to earth. They don't want to get too theoretical and philosophical and all that stuff. So we get that. We understand that as wrestlers. So right away, we're leading them through, okay, so our first lesson that we'll take them through, tell us about your best 3 wrestling matches. What were you thinking before and during those matches? Write it down on paper, put it down. And then you find the common themes. What are the common trends? Now do the same thing with your worst 3 matches. Tell me about the match. What was going on? What were you telling yourself? Write that down. Let's find those common themes. Let's find those common patterns. Okay, so right off the bat, we have them talking about wrestling, right? And then the next few exercises we have them go through the next few weeks. We do a different do a different worksheet or exercise each time on the phone. The next time we might have them do a match evaluation in terms of their effort, their attitude, their aggressiveness, very specific wrestling situations. Then we'll have them go through a pre-match routine right before the match. What are you telling yourself? What are you doing? Now let's build a positive pre-match routine that's going to get you in your optimal mindset. So it all starts off hyper specific about wrestling rather than just speaking generally about, well, what makes you upset? What makes you overthink? That's been a non-starter, especially for young kids and a lot of kids now too. It's, you see, they're always with the phone. So they're not even, a lot of these kids aren't even as capable of getting deep right away. Like in our generation, people would be capable of having a more real connection right away because your head wasn't always down on your phone. These kids, they're not used to connecting at that level. So we need to break through that by sometimes speaking more on the surface. So we get them talking about wrestling right away. That's the first 10 lessons. And then after that, then we break them out where they need the most. So if you're struggling most with relaxing under pressure, you're going to move through the relaxing under pressure series. A lot of our top wrestlers, they come to us after getting hurt. If they're injured, well, now mentally, that can make it or break it for them. So they start our mindset program after doing the first few weeks of self-knowledge. Then they go through mentally recovering from injuries. So now we could give each person exactly what they need right away. But the idea is to really bulletproof their mindset. Just like any good strength coach is going to bulletproof your body. We want you to have no weaknesses in your entire body. Same thing with the mind. Just because I put out the fire that your kid's struggling with doesn't mean the rest of his mindset is bulletproof. So yes, we need to put out the fire first, but then we need to make sure that each one of those mental muscles is rock solid. So there's no kinks in the armor when they go up against their very best at competition.
I mean, I feel like everybody could benefit from this level of coaching, no matter whether they think they need it or not. But I also feel like, how many parents are just, let's say they sign up their kid or they sign up a kid that's, almost, would be perceived as being too young for something like this, just because, they want them to be the best, or just because, they want them to win, kind of a thing. Like, are there ever times where you're just like, this kid doesn't really need it, or everybody needs it, but maybe they're just not buying into it, or they're not giving 100% in the session or something?
I mean, it ultimately comes down to the kid, right? The kid's got to want to do it, right? But the way you really want it, the way to really conceptualize it that we talk about especially with our team clients, we work with our teams on Zoom. The way you got to look at it is this is no different than your strength training or your conditioning. As a coach, you're understanding that this is a part of the sport. The mindset is 90% of the sport. So you're doing the mindset training. You don't have a choice in that because this is a necessary ingredient to win. When we were working with the United States Greco-Roman team, the head coach asked us, he said, well, what should be the punishment if the kid misses a mindset session? And we said it should be no greater or no less than what would happen to them if they missed a lift. This is a team workout and you missed it. So whatever that is, because that's exactly how you want them to think about it. You don't want them to look at this as a guest speaker or motivational speaking. This is training your mind, and it's very important. So yeah, I mean, the way I appeal to people, again, you can't force people to do it, but this is really something everyone should be doing throughout their career because, first of all, you got to put out fires. Everyone, no one's Superman. No one's got an S on their chest. Everyone struggles in different ways mentally. So you got to put out the number one fire that you have as a wrestler. And if you don't have one, if you don't think you have one, the higher levels you get to, you'll find it. It's there. Then you have to also bulletproof those other areas of mindset. And then on top of it, you just have ongoing mental struggles, right? And it's just even outside of wrestling too. Girlfriend breaks up with you. You don't do as well on a test. You don't get into your dream school. Your friends are making fun of you. There's just so many things that happen that could derail you mentally and emotionally that there's just no chance that I don't have my kids working with one of our mindset coaches. No, it's got to happen, whether they like it or not. This is an important part of their development. And especially now, I don't need to tell you how crazy things are in society. And unfortunately, a lot of the garbage that they're dumping in kids' heads in school, like you're sending your kid in for an education, they come out with an indoctrination. You can't have enough positive people that are in your kid's mind that are giving them, actually teaching them how to think properly, rather than what we're getting in society, where it's extremely soft, a lot of excuses, and on top of everything else. So yeah, it's something that all the wrestlers really need to be doing. And that's why we wanted to create programs that's available to all of them. I get it. Not everyone's going to be able to afford our 30-day mindset transformation. Right. So that's why we have the weekly and the bi-weekly option. If you're a serious wrestler and they're pouring a ton of money already into travel and camps and tournaments, which is great, they need to be doing that. They need to be traveling to go to camps and tournaments to be a successful wrestler. You can't just say, yeah, no, you're not going to go to tournaments. Wrong. You can't say I'm not going to go to a club. Wrong. Right. So it's the same thing with mindset. They usually have the money to do the weekly, if not bi-weekly. And then you have the safety net at the bottom are twice a week group Zoom calls. Like anyone can do that. If you're, if you're a serious wrestler and you're not doing that, there's something wrong because it's a mental sport.
So like how much is focused just on, let's say, wrestling / achieving your potential versus, like you said, like life skills, right? So like we actually talk about at all our tournaments about mental health and suicide awareness. I'm sure there's some crossover there,
Yeah.
but how much of that, because you're talking about life skills, like beyond wrestling, beyond the sport, as an adult, but when you're first starting and when you're with an athlete, is it more of like tunnel vision? Like I'm trying to help you achieve your goals and just have confidence, and break through on the mental side specifically so you can achieve your potential? Or is it also like you're also focusing on things in general, like, hey, you can have confidence in schoolwork or not getting bullied or just trying to get the hot girl in school or whatever it may be?
Yeah. So you got to see where the kid is at. So our goal is ultimately all of our mindset coaches know our primary goal, our main mission is to use wrestling as a vehicle to build mental skills and virtue for their entire life. So how you get there with each kid is going to be a little bit different. Some kids might be really skeptical at first, like, what am I doing here and everything. So you for those kids, you might talk directly about success, what's important to them. So right when someone signs up for the program, the parent fills out a questionnaire giving a lot of information about their kid. So what are their goals? What are their interests? So that's what we want to talk about right away, just to get some of that buy-in right away, get that connection. So for a lot of kids, we're starting off talking about winning and success because a lot of the serious wrestlers we're dealing with, that's what they care about. They're not thinking about like, oh, life and all these. They're just thinking, I want to win. How do I win? I'll work with that. We start talking about winning right away. And we could give you a lot of zingers of what to do, things you've never thought about, that if you start doing this, it's going to help you immediately. Not that there's, complete quick fixes. A lot of things you do take time, mental patterns that you need to, habits that you need to break over time. But there are some very quick tips and tricks that you could be doing right away that are going to help you immediately. So we want to give those to the wrestlers right away. So now they're seeing some success and it gives you the buy-in. Hey, I tried the strategy that you gave me and it really helped. Now they're more primed to absorb other lessons. But every single mindset lesson that we have, there is a correlation to life. And when we train our mindset coaches, we actually have a syllabus that they look through. So when they're taking their kids through the mindset sessions, they're able to see this is how this lesson connects to their school and their life. So there's always the three components to whatever mindset exercise we have: wrestling, school, and life. We want them to make that connection for the big picture. The only thing is, if the kid's a little bit skeptical at first or doesn't have that buy-in, I would keep it away from school and life right away. But as they get more comfortable, we start integrating school and life every single time. Because exactly right, like you said, there's so many highly successful athletes and movie stars and singers, and they have so many, they have so much money, they're good looking, they got all this fame and all the followers on social media, and a lot of these people's lives are in absolute shambles. And like you said, depression, suicide, substance abuse. I don't take any of that stuff lightly, as a school psychologist. So we need to make sure that they're doing well. Like their happiness, their mental and emotional well-being is primary in our mind. And that trumps wrestling. Like if it's really between that and wrestling, don't wrestle. Because let's figure that out first. And then you could always come back to wrestling if need be. But a lot of times it's just that they have some habits, whether it's themselves or their parents, their family, that's got them off track a little bit inadvertently. They're messing themselves up mentally and emotionally, and we fix those things. Usually then wrestling is fun. They do want to wrestle. It's just they've been getting in their own way.
So if I'm new, do I have an option to select who I want my coach to be, or do you guys assign based off of
Yeah.
location or age or gender or what?
Yeah, we got to assign it because so when you fill out that parent questionnaire, we see exactly what your kid is looking for, what his needs are, what his interests are, because that's the connection is most important between the mindset coach and the kid. And we've been very blessed too. We've done an unbelievable job connecting the wrestlers with the right mindset coaches. I mean, we could see if the kid is interested in getting into an Ivy League school, we could usually match them up with a mindset coach who went to an Ivy League school. One of the kids wanted to own a gym in the future. We matched him up with the mindset coach who owned a gym. One of the kids had a serious injury. We matched him up with the mindset coach who bounced back from a serious injury. Military academy and so on and so forth. We could see where they, and then also there's time zone differences. So we try to, as best as we can, make that as convenient as we can. Some kids prefer mindset sessions before school, some after school, some weekends. That's the benefit of having all the mindset coaches. If the parent lets us know all that information, we could find someone who works for them. And that's the real benefit of the phone, that they don't have to go into some doctor's office. They're speaking to a wrestler. So there's already buy-in, the fact they're speaking to a wrestler. And now that wrestler is going to be even more suited to them. So that's why the parent's questionnaire is so big, that once they sign up, the parent fills that out. If worst case scenario, there really wasn't a good fit or time conflicts, yes, we can always rematch them with a different mindset coach. But I have to say, we've been very blessed that that's happened very few times.
So before I jump maybe topics a little bit and talk about some of your coaches, is there anything that if I'm a parent or a wrestler or anybody listening at all, or something we haven't touched on yet, is there anything that you want people to know if they're considering, getting this level of training, getting mindset training, or just anything at all from the athlete's perspective?
I mean, this is just what the very best are doing. Like back in I think it was the early 90s when Michael Jordan started strength training, and people were saying, oh, that's ridiculous. Basketball players, this and that. And now everyone's strength training. Right. So, it's usually those early adopters, the people who take action right away, they wind up having that edge. And then it becomes everyone's doing it. And you have to look at it. When you look at the professional sports teams, pretty much any sport, the high level Division I wrestling teams or any sports, they have sports psychologists, they have mindset experts, they have performance coaches. They're all over the place. Right. So it's not like, yes, it's partially getting the edge, and it's partially keeping up with what everyone else is doing. So it's really important that they're doing that. I mean, you look at pro golfers, I think it's like 90% of pro golfers have mindset coaches to some extent. So it's real important. And again, there's a difference between, mentorship and coaching, which are, again, great. You need that. There's a lot of coaches that have great talks with their athletes, but that's like 1.0. 2.0 is now you're actually working with someone who specializes in mindset, like a specialist. Like you have a knee injury, you go to a knee specialist, right? And then take it to the next level where it's not just mindset specialist, but a wrestling mindset specialist. So it's like if you had a problem with your ACL, you're not just going to a knee specialist who specializes in ACL, right? So that's the level of specificity that we're really talking about there. I get excited because, like, again, if I had this, it just a lot of the pressures that I felt and the painful trial and error, man, if I just got this right, how come I'm not putting this together what I do in practice? It's not just that you win more. Yeah, that's awesome. We all want to win more, but it's more fun. I think of so many times when I was wrestling, my brothers were wrestling. It's like, let's get this match over with. I just want to get this. I want to wrestle my tournament and be done with it. Well, good luck wrestling a guy who lives for this. Good luck wrestling against a guy who really enjoys competing. It's just hard because we get in our own way.
So if I'm an athlete, it doesn't matter how young or how old you are. It doesn't matter what gender, and it doesn't matter what sport. They should absolutely consider trying wrestling mindset or winning mindset, because they're going to gain an edge and they're going to get better mentally.
Absolutely.
So let's switch gears a little bit. How do you select your coaches / what if I'm just some random person out there? I'm a former coach. I'm interested in potentially becoming a mindset coach. How can I do that?
Well, they could actually, they reach out to us, mindset@wrestlingmindset.com. We'll absolutely give them a look. We only hire in certain states because you got to keep up with each state's different laws. But yeah, I mean, if coaches reach out to us, we could absolutely talk about them coming on board. They could be a part-time mindset coach, which is a great thing. You could take your calls on the road. You make your own hours there. You coordinate the hours with the kid, of course. And, of course, you'd have to go through our certification process. We got to screen you, background checks, the whole bit. We got to, bring you up to speed in our program. But yeah, if they're interested, absolutely, they could definitely reach out.
But do they have to have a degree in psychology or anything, or they really just need to be what you're looking for and then go through your certification program?
No, and that's a common thing. Just because someone has their, like, let's say someone was a sports psychologist, they have their doctorate, that does not automatically mean we're going to hire them. No, because one of our big things that we bring to the table, this is wrestling specific. Most of our mindset coaches were former college wrestlers,
Okay.
or they have years of experience as a coach. Even if they weren't like an absolute high level wrestler, they have experience coaching, right? They've been involved in the sport of wrestling for a very long time, because we want people who really understand the sport. And then as far as the know-how in terms of psychology, most of the wrestlers, like once we explain the lesson, they get the essence of it. What we've done is we've structured it, we've standardized it. Like a lot of coaches talk about a lot of the things we do, but it's okay, we have it structured, we have it standardized, and now we have the worksheets and the exercises built out where put the pen to paper and the wrestler fills this out. Like, okay, now write down, you're going to develop a reset button. Anytime adversity strikes in the match, what are you going to tell yourself? If you make a mistake, if you get put to your back, if you have a lead with short time, if there's a bad call against you, if the crowd gets loud or negative, any of those situations that could happen and many others, what do you tell yourself in those moments? Put the pen to paper, write it down, and then let's go through it. And then let's spend some time visualizing it 1 or 2 times a week. Right. So yeah,
I mean, speaking of not winning championships, I mean, I was a 2-time runner-up, and I feel like our coaching staff did a great job on the mat, technique-wise and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know that I recall there being any mental training back in the 90s with us. I didn't wrestle in college. I didn't go to college, as a matter of fact, but in high school, and that's where I think, the losses came from, right? Or, some of the tough matches. So, I was wrestling. There was times where I was wrestling not to lose instead of wrestling to win, or I was worried about, it's different things. And, yeah, we would do, hey, you're down by 2 or you're down by 4, but okay, but what about your mindset? Like
Exactly.
The worst thing that could happen is you get hit in a 5-point move and you're like, fuck, how am I going to come back from a 5-point move? Or, I'm wrestling a guy that's a national champion and I haven't won nationals yet. So how do I get after him? Do I just give him the respect that everybody thinks he deserves, or do I get after the guy? So, I always say that, like, if there was a couple of different coaches I could have combined into one, I probably would have been a multiple-time champ. And that's not the only reason. There was other things, but I mean, like, I certainly think that the mental side of things, I could have gained a much greater advantage, but I got plenty of coaching on the mat, just not necessarily off the mat.
Right. And that's like that reset button that we were talking about. It's exactly what you were saying there. Situations live, start holding the person's leg, start from a front headlock, start with the leg in on top of you, start holding a cradle, right? You put yourself in, the coaches put the kids in different technical situations, so they've seen the situation before. But are we really spending a lot of time mentally? What am I going to tell myself when this happens? Because it's probably going to happen at a bad time. You have to always write, like, these situations happen at a bad time. And if you get taken down at first against a guy you're a lot better than, and you panic, you're in big trouble. That's like a lot of people's worst losses when things like that happen. They just didn't deal with adversity well. When things are fine, they're good, or they're wrestling real well, and then in the third period they're like, "Oh man, I'm beating this guy." They can't believe they're winning, and then they blow it. Right? So you have to have those situations. You have to have those kind of situations planned out. And you're right, we did not go through those kind of things when we were younger. It was just, there was like a stigma attached to psychology. That's one of the aspects. And mental health and wellness, like, oh, you only go there if you have a problem, but it's not a problem. It's just a part of the sport. Like, you don't just weightlift if you're weak. No one looks at it like that. Like, oh, you're only weightlifting because you're weak. No, you're weightlifting because this is part of the sport. Same thing with conditioning. You don't do extra conditioning because you're out of shape. Might be part of the reason why, but you have to do extra conditioning so you have a gas tank. Well, it's the same thing with mindset. Like, you don't wait until it's a problem. And the other thing is, it was just kind of coming from that Gable mentality of, we just always had a very, we got to be tough. We got to be hard. We got to be mean. And it's almost like if we start talking about our feelings and our emotions or our thought process and being a little bit vulnerable, it sounds like we're not supposed to do that. And that's exactly where people were struggling. So we needed to break through that. Like, it's the humble will be exalted. The exalted will be humble. We know that when it comes to technique, we know that when it comes to strength, we know that when it comes to conditioning. We weren't, for a while, our coaches just weren't putting that together, that, we have to be a little bit vulnerable. When you're going for an extra rep, when you're going for that last rep on a bench press or a squat, it's pretty darn vulnerable because it goes backwards, right? You got to be vulnerable when you're hitting the limit. Well, the same thing. You hit a mental and emotional vulnerability. It's not as apparent visually, but it's every bit as real. even more real. You could see people crack under pressure. We've all felt it. So they just weren't addressing that. And I think also it's a lot they didn't know how. Again, what are the exercises to get a kid more aggressive? What are the exercises to get a kid more confident? What are the exercises to relax under pressure? Most people have no idea. And for me, it would be just like if you said, how do you get stronger legs? Squats, deadlifts, leg press, thigh curls, hamstring curls. Yeah, you're going through all of them, leg extensions, step ups, lunges. You could rattle them off. It needs to be like that with mindset. So every coach, every parent, every athlete knows, oh, you want to be more confident? Here's 10 exercises you could do. Do you need all 10 of them to work? No, you need one of them to work. If one of them works, if I said, I have $1 million behind one of the stones in the parking lot, you'd lift up every single stone to find that $100. You need to lift one stone to get the $1 million. Well, it's the same thing. If I throw 10 exercises, you're relaxing under pressure, and you just need one of them, that was the real gold. It was worth picking up the other 9 because now you've learned some mental skills you could apply to different areas. You have a better picture of how the mind and the emotions work, but you're able to fix the problem because you found what you need.
Yeah. From a business perspective, if you don't mind me asking a little bit, and this is more because, I love business. I've built multiple businesses. I look at other people. I was a coach, in a wrestling club, but what was it like in the beginning when you hired your first coach, or when you went from, that vision that you had that, hey, maybe I can't coach every person across the country. And then now you've grown to 100 coaches, but more so, I think in the beginning, everybody was probably like, even if you had 10 coaches, no, I want Gene, I want Jeff. I don't want the other guy. So what was it like kind of growing and going through that process so you could, offer your services to more people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I remember those moments vividly. That was 2014. Before then, I was providing 100% of the services. So no problem. Hey, I talked to someone. I'm making the sales call. I'll take you. No problem. I'm seeing you. You go with me. I make the videos. You go with me. Okay. And I remember going for a run once and really thinking, I remember I was in Hillsborough, and I'm thinking, like, how the heck am I going to find other people to do this? Like, and I remember going for a run, and then it kind of hit me while I was working out. Well, so the first thing was my brother. The first thing that was, I got to get my brother to be doing this because he was doing all the marketing and all the finance, all the behind the scenes things. So right away I said, my brother's got to learn how to do this so I could, this load is too big for me now. Jeff was not trained as a counselor. He was, it was economics and everything. So he had no experience with this. So what I needed to do right away, I could just grip it and rip it and talk to a kid. I would be like a Rambo coach where I could just get in there and start talking to the kid, figure out what's going on and do that. Jeff couldn't do that on his own, right? So what I did right away is I need to build a curriculum. I need to standardize a curriculum that he could use. And then not only do I have the curriculum, I need to write out a lesson plan for how he takes him through that curriculum. So that was like a 4 or 5 day process. And I mean, 4 or 5 days, I mean like the whole day. That's all I did, right? So he built the curriculum, the wrestling specific curriculum. And then that's now you have all these books in front of you. I have the U.S. Olympic Sports Psychology Training Manual that we got at the University of Pennsylvania. I have that in front of me. I have the book Fight Your Fears and Win. I went through the Tony Robbins Personal Power series and many other resources. You got all these books on the desk. And now you're like, all right, well, now I have to put this together in some kind of logical way. So there was that aspect. And then once I put that all together, I have the standardization. Jeff started mindset coaching, which was an easier transition at first because, well, you're going from one Zannetti to another Zannetti. So at least mentally, the perception is, even though he wasn't trained as a counselor, he's still my brother. And the reality is we talk all the time. So even if we're different personalities, and we are very different personalities, we think the same way about all this because we've always been together and we always talk about everything. So that was easy, but then how do we get other people? That was the real challenge. And then it hit me like, there's a lot of people on the Olympic ladder who all they're doing is training. They're volunteer assistant coaches places, but they might need jobs. So we started doing that right away. We started hiring people who were on the Olympic ladder, like not the highest level, not like Jordan Burroughs, David Taylor, Kyle Dake, but what about the guys ranked 4 through 10 who are still competing? They don't have big sponsorship deals. They're probably going to need money. So we started through them. And then we went through some of our teammates from college. And, at the University of Pennsylvania, we actually had a lot of wrestlers who weren't, sounds funny that like at Penn and at Cornell, we probably had most of our mindset coaches. Sounds funny because at an Ivy League school, you would think like, well, these people are all going into business, but not necessarily. A lot of these people were looking to do things that were off the beaten path. So we hired a lot of our former teammates, and as well as some of our, Cornell wrestlers, fellow Ivy League people. And then as time went on and as our name grew and we got more legs out, we were able to just put the word out to the wrestling community. People would come back saying they're interested. We have our interview process, our multiple step interview process. Then we have our training, our certification. And then one of the things we were doing is we partnered up with Beat the Streets. And to make sure the people were good at counseling, we had them start with some of the Beat the Streets athletes on a volunteer basis. We would listen in on their calls. We would train them. So, it was really thinking outside of the box. But yeah, that was 2014. That was primary in my mind. How the heck do we get this bigger? Because yeah, I was helping a few people a lot, but I wanted to help a lot of people. So that means, okay, well, if you're moving up the ladder, so to speak, I got to find a lot of other people who are very good. So like I said, there was that. And we have our manager, Jake Hunter, who's our COO. He manages a lot of the operations. He's very good. We were very blessed to get him early. So I put together a training program. So all these mindset coaches are operating under the tutelage and the direction of me and my credentials, as well as our office team, like Jeff, Jake, Anthony Mastrangelo, Bo Tillman, our guys. So yeah, that was a heck of a year.
Yeah.
And here's one other thing I'll add to that, Corey. One of the big things in my head was, before all that, I said, do I take wrestlers and teach them counseling, or do I take counselors and teach them wrestling? That was a big moment for me, because I didn't know. I'm like, I could see it going either way. Like, okay, if they've already trained counseling and if they're psychology, then I just teach them the gist of wrestling, and then they help them. They're already trained as a counselor. But I thought, you know what? I put the question to myself, when I was in middle school and high school, who would I rather work with? A wrestler who was taught counseling, or a counselor who was taught wrestling? If I said that right. And it was a no-brainer in my head. I would rather work with a former wrestler that was taught the counseling. So I said, that's the direction we're going.
So did you just put all the, the curriculum together yourself, let's say the SOPs or whatever,
Yep.
the certifications, or did you then hire, let's say, an outside third-party company to help you formulate all that and take your thoughts and put it on paper?
No, I did all that. That's my brainchild. Thanks be to God.
What about this, that natural thought of nobody can do it as good as me? How did you get past that? Or did you ever even have that?
So yeah, of course there's like, this is what I do. This is my training, but it doesn't have to be as good as me. It has to be close enough. And I mean, I think any business owner realizes you can't solve every single problem. The one benefit is I'm not a perfectionist. So I don't think like that. This has to be exactly what it is. No, it has to very closely resemble what I do. But the reality is, the fact that there's different people with different experiences, that opens up all kinds of interesting possibilities that I couldn't do on my own. Like the fact that, like, when someone comes to me and it's like, well, hey, I'd rather work with you. Okay, well, there's a rate for that. It's going to be a lot more than you think. But if you work with one of our mindset coaches, it might actually even be better, because here's why. You filled out the parent questionnaire, and I'm seeing your kid struggling with this or wants to do that. And listen, we have a mindset coach who's been there and done that exactly as your kid wants. That's an advantage. Your kid wants even if it's just, a certain time they want the session. This kid can accommodate, this mindset coach can accommodate your kid. So no, as long it's one of those things where sometimes good enough is going to have to be good enough. Otherwise, I'm only going to be able to help like 25 kids, and then that's it. And okay, so now I'm booked, and that's it. And the reality is, a lot of kids need help. Most of the serious wrestlers need help.
I mean, okay, so I'm switching gears a little bit, unless, there's other things you want to talk about specifically with wrestling mindset training, but what advice would you have for someone that wants to start a business, or maybe wants to take a passion or, an interest or a hobby and try to make a business out of it? Because again, like, you have an Ivy League education, you have all this education, your parents were saying, hey, why don't you just go collect a paycheck? And you decided to jump off that cliff and go out and do your own thing. But, what about somebody that wants to start their own business? Like, do you have any advice to them, or all the obstacles and hurdles that they're going to have to go through?
You got to understand the market. You got to understand where you're trying to, first of all, having a niche. The greater the niche, you find a niche of what you're looking for. And ideally that niche would be someone like you, or someone you could seriously relate to, because then you don't have to learn as much how to speak to those people. Like, it's not hard to speak. It was never hard to speak to a wrestler or a coach, because I was one of them. Right. So you have to have a niche, definitely get mentors, definitely start reading business books. I mean, when I was at Rutgers, the fact that I knew I was going into psychology, going into the school, I didn't waste any time. I didn't take any BS electives. I was almost done before I transferred to Penn, which was strictly an educational decision. Not that the education was a great at Rutgers. It was. I just had an opportunity to go Ivy League, so I caught at it. But I, my last year at Rutgers, I was done with pretty much all my classes of psychology. I started taking business classes. Now that brought my cum way down because I'm not like naturally a business person, right? I'm good with like the psychology, the sales, but as far as like the business, that wasn't my forte. But I started taking classes on economics, accounting, and all that because I wanted to start learning about owning a business. I read not only just Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is like the introduction, but then his subsequent books that were getting more into the weeds about a financial education. So you better know something about that. You better be ridiculously honest with yourself on what you're good at and what you're bad at and what you like and what you like and what you absolutely hate. There's always going to be some things that you're going to have to do that you don't like. But if there's something that's absolutely a non-starter, you better be darn honest with yourself with that. You better get a mentor, multiple mentors. I mean, even once I started doing this, you try to find someone who's already where you want to be or close to it. So you better have multiple mentors. SCORE helped us a lot in New York City. We were going there, and in Hackensack in New Jersey, we were going once or twice a year to SCORE to meet with different mentors. One was a former CFO, another one was a salesperson. So we're meeting with other people. And then the other thing is, ready, fire, aim. You got to get started. Just get started. Just friggin' do it. Because like a lot of times it's, oh, I have to have my business cards made. I have to have a perfect website. No, you don't. What you need is sales. If you don't have sales, you have a hobby. You don't have a job. You don't have a job, right? You don't have a business. You have a hobby. So you got to learn you got to put a lot of time into the sales and the marketing aspect. You got to learn how to sell yourself because at first you're the one selling the product. Yeah, like I said, the ready, fire, aim approach is going to be big. Just get started, and the self knowledge is going to be huge. That's why mindset coaching is important for any business owner too, because you really do have to be honest with yourself. And if you can't do it all yourself, you better find a partner that you trust that shares a similar vision as you. I was very, very blessed. I mean, that was a godsend. And my brother and I have like identical goals, shared values. That's not easy. That basically dropped on our lap. So, and you have to be realistic too, that you might have to have a job in the meantime while you're starting your business, which means you might have to work double for a period of time. Right. So
yeah.
Self-awareness.
I mean, one of the things is like, so in the beginning, you're on a very limited budget, every dollar counts. I think most people are focused on the expense and not the revenue, going out and selling and making the money, but they try to do everything themselves, but they might be an expert in being a plumber, but they're not an expert in sales or accounting or whatever. So, or you think, are you trying to do everything yourself, or you just got to hire the right people and get the right people in place to do that job so you can focus on what you're really good at?
Both. I mean, it depends. It's one of those things. You have to see, that's where that self inventory and having mentors where you're asking them, it's okay, this is what I'm good at. This is what I'm not good at. This is what I love to do. This is what I hate. This is what I hate, but I'm willing to do to get to my goals. So, a little bit of both. I know that's not really a straightforward answer, but you have to kind of be honest with yourself and see exactly what is it that you need. A simple thing anyone could do, if you want to have your own business, start putting out content. Just get the content out there and see how that's going, because that's going to, social media will help to some extent. Are people interested in your message? A lot of times people will try to create a market rather than finding a market that already exists, or a market that's there that's just being untapped. Like, we knew that mental training, all wrestlers were saying wrestling is 90% mental, and there was no one that was blowing a loud horn saying we are mental training for wrestling. So even though there wasn't like a market in the sense of already established, it was there. We knew it, but we knew it because we were intimately involved. So start making content right away. Like, the simplest thing people could do, make a podcast, start interviewing experts, start having conversations, start giving your tips yourself. Like, don't wait for everything to be perfect. At first, it's not going to be perfect. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. You got to reach out to a lot of people, and you do have to be a serious hustler and go-getter. And if that's not for you, then maybe being a business owner, there's no shame in that. You got to know yourself. It takes a special person to do any job, for almost any job. So you have to find out if that really is for you.
Yeah, so I'll kind of finish with this and just piggybacking off what you said, and maybe you can elaborate. But I was talking to one of my so I coached for 20 plus years. I was talking to one of my former wrestlers. He recently graduated college. Now he's a realtor, but he's trying to get into investment properties.
Mhm.
And a deal fell through recently, and he said, I didn't want to bother, I don't want to bother people. I don't want to be a hindrance. And I said, wait a minute. I said, most people that are successful, especially business owners, they want to share their knowledge. They want to mentor, people. Why take 10 years learning something and wasting time and money when if you have the right mentor, you could cut that in half or even by a third,
Right.
and, you wouldn't have made that mistake. So, after, a 30-minute conversation with him, I'm like, I want you to call me as much as you want. We can just, bullshit and talk all the time, or you can call me about something specific. And not that I know it all, but I have the resources and, out there and things like that. I'll find the answers. But, had he talked to me prior to that, like, he wouldn't have probably lost that deal in real estate. But my point is, hey, find that right person, find the mentor, find somebody, there's no shame. I have so many people now in my life that are mentors in business. I pick up the phone and I call them all the time. And yeah, there's times when if you don't know somebody, it's like, man, you don't want it to be a one-way relationship. You want to give something back, but you can't be fearful of asking. But I don't know that I've ever been told no. Everybody wants to share that
Yeah.
information, and it's just a matter of asking. So how important is, no matter what it is, business, wrestling, mindset, how important, or as you become an adult is, having a mentor, or maybe more so having the right network of people around you. How important do you think that is? We'll kind of close out there.
It's huge. And I mean, that's part of like a wrestling lesson. We talk a lot about wrestling, right? It's you got to attack. You got to get after the leg. You got to be aggressive. In business, you might call that being tactfully tenacious. But you got to think about who are some of your connections, and you do need to tap into those people. The great thing about entrepreneurs, it's kind of like that unspoken code of like pay it forward. And I spoke to two people last week who just called me out of the blue through different connections saying, hey, I'm looking to start my own business with this. More than happy to help them. And they're like, oh, I don't, I feel bad. I don't want to take up your time. I say, listen, there's a lot of people who've put time in for free with me because I had questions. So, it's one of those things you pay it forward. But yeah, your networking is huge. And for me, you think about where are some of the places you can network, and you do really want to be a networking machine. It's, where did you go to school? Whether it's high school or college, like who are places you went to school? Did you play any sports? Are there any clubs that you were a part of? Are, whatever, political affiliations, religion? Are there any religious groups? Like getting around people who are like-minded, because all things being equal, people want to do business with people they like. And all things not being so equal, people still want to do business with people they like, right? So usually like attracts like. If you have the shared interests in some kind of area, if you're from the same streets, same groups, same beliefs about certain things, yeah, you're likely to help each other. So yeah, you really do want to be a networking machine. That's very important.
I mean, before I started the podcast, and then, I started off, I'd say strong. I was doing, consistently putting it out, and then I stopped for 6 months or whatever it was. And now I'm picking back up again. But for a while I was thinking, like, why me? Like, who am I? Right. But I'm thinking big picture, I don't have all these accomplishments or accolades, or I'm not a world champ, or I'm not a billionaire or whatever. And then I just said, well, why not me? Right. So even if nobody listens to my podcast, I'm expanding my network. I'm learning. I'm getting to know people. Like you and I have never had an hour-long conversation
No.
just to get to know each other. So, I just looked at it like, all right, if nobody ever listens, it's only going to develop me personally and professionally, and then I'll take that. And honestly, even if we have, enough followers like a Joe Rogan, great. But more so, it's about me learning and developing personally and professionally. And I think that's more important than the number of people that are going to listen or follow these podcasts.
There's so much good that see when the action beats inaction almost any time. And that's it's like wrestling too. 9 times out of 10, it's the guy who gets to the leg who ends up winning, right? Yeah, there's defensive wizards out there. They're few and far between. I wouldn't recommend banking on that, right? So there's just so much that you gain. You gain knowledge just from talking to someone else. Also, in the sport of wrestling, I find if there's any two people who've been involved in wrestling for any amount of time, if they have a conversation that's half hour long, they're going to say some things that are going to benefit the entire wrestling world just by their experience. I mean, I guess primary, you're a child of God. You have a voice. So there's no reason why you can't share your experience. No one's had an experience quite like yours. And, not everyone's accomplishment is in terms of being an Olympic champ, but we all have lived life for a certain amount of time, and you have experiences, you have successes in your area. You know what you're talking about in your area, at least. So there's not, and then you're always learning from the people with the podcast. Perception, it's great because hey, now I have my own show. during COVID, when a lot of things, when pretty much everything shut down, that was the time where I was able to interview people like Ken Shamrock and Chuck Liddell and all kinds of these celebrities that I've never had a chance to interview. And now I could say, hey, yeah, I had this person on my show. I had the owner of this company on the show. It's just a win all the way around. We're helping each other. You're helping me get a platform. I feel indebted to you for that. You know what I mean? It's just there's just a lot of good things about just putting out content. And there's no
Yeah.
starting or stopping, only doing. You don't have to worry about being great at it. You just do it. Just get it going.
Yeah. Well, in closing, is there anything that we didn't already talk about, but more so, I always just kind of like to ask, but I mean, anything about you or your company or your family, but is there anything about you that you want people to know?
Except to say, first and foremost, the most important thing is my faith, my Catholic faith. I tried. That's my biggest regret is that I didn't dive deeper, closer relationship with God. When 2015, my brother said he wanted to be a priest. That hit me like a slap in the face. He broke up with his girlfriend in 2.5 years. Said he wants to give his life to God. I said, wow, that's impressive. How well am I living the faith? Could be a lot better. So that really like hit me. I said, all right, I gotta dive deeper into this and really live my faith. So, Catholic faith being primary and being a husband and father. I mean, that's the most important thing. At the end of the day, God is not going to judge me based on how successful I was in wrestling or in my career, even though I want to, I want it to be the best wrestler. I absolutely want to crush my career. But at the end of the day, I got to be a good husband and father. So I guess that's, maybe it's not as exciting of the things to talk about, but really that's the most important thing. And I could tell you a lot of our mindset coaches are more faith-based. A lot of parents want their kids to have that, not just the performance element of wrestling mindset, but to have someone who's going to walk with them in their faith and help them bring them in a closer relationship to God. And we've been very blessed to have people who do that as well. So yeah, we didn't talk about it a lot, but that I try to make that the driving factor in my life, my faith, and my relationship with God.
I mean, I feel like we could probably have a whole nother podcast on that, but I mean, I went to a Baptist grade school, and then I went to an independent middle school, but then I ended up going to a Catholic high school. And I feel like when I was younger, when I went to church or when I just did all those things because my parents told me that I was supposed to do it. Then I would say as a young adult and as a young father, because I started a family very young, I really wasn't into it. We went through some of the things, getting the kids baptized or, christened, things like that. But, it's probably been, my youngest son is 25, I'm 18. So it's probably been about 7, 8 years. But there was different times, fight with my wife, fight with my kids, losing your job. There was different things that always kind of drew me back to, trying to find a church or drawing back on my faith. But, it's 40 years old. What's it, 40, 45? I don't know. It's been a few years. I didn't know. So I started going to a non-denominational church and I really liked it. And then I was like, I'm going to recommit myself to my faith. And I ended up getting baptized again as an adult, but I was scared to call my mother because I thought she was going to say, Corey, why are you getting baptized again? Like you already had this when you were a kid. When come to find out, she said, Corey, you've never been baptized. And, it's up to you to choose when you want to be baptized. Like you were raised as a Christian, but, you need to choose when you're ready to take God as your savior or, the Lord as your savior. So as an adult in front of all my grown children and my wife, they took me out. My pastor took me out into the bay down here in Lewis Beach, but right outside of Rehoboth in Delaware. And we did it on my birthday. Trying to remember. I don't think it's been 7 years, but maybe I don't know. It was on my birthday, but it was a few years ago. But yeah, like I don't tend to talk about it a lot. I also don't. Sometimes I feel hypocritical, or I think, I don't know. Because I know I'm still a sinner, but I know we're all sinners. But I do feel better. I know that I feel better when I'm singing at church. I feel better when I'm around other Christians. I'm still, I don't always make the right decisions, but I've leaned much further into my faith as an adult now because it's been my choice. It's been nothing but great for me. But I know you see, and look, we know other things have happened with other athletes, but nobody's perfect, right? So, but who am I to judge, right? I'm not the judge, and I'm not perfect. But I'm glad you brought that up. I know that there's FCAs that are across the country and things like that. But yeah, so I appreciate that. Thanks you for sharing that. The last thing I would, yeah. I'm sorry, Gene.
Oh no, I was just saying that interestingly, when we set up our vendor booths at tournaments, I have 2 books. I have several books, but the primary books are Building the Predator Mindset, right? We talk about, the right mindset in sports, school, and life. And the other book I have is Spiritual Strength, Building the Total Athlete for Christ. And I can tell you this, when we're at tournaments, we sell just as much spiritual strength books as we do the mindset books, which is crazy. Like I would have never thought that would be the case, but I figured, hey, I have these. One day I said, let me just put these out too. And those would fly off too. And people saying, wow, they went through this and it really helped them. So that's it's a great thing. Like we said, it's being the total package, spirit, mind, and body. And I think as a wrestler and as a business owner, there's so many lessons and so much introspection and so much, digging deep. Why am I doing this? What's it all about? And as well as parenting, that it forces you to ask the big questions. So I don't think you can go through a life without really getting deep into the spiritual side as well, right? Getting close to God.
Yeah. Well, the announcement that I would have, and I know we haven't formalized everything yet, but I know we've been in conversations probably for a year.
Yep.
And I think, most people that are probably listening to this podcast would know who I am, but, Tyrant Wrestling runs about 20 tournaments, primarily on the East Coast, but, from Pennsylvania to Florida out to Ohio. But next weekend, I know you're going to come out for the first time. So this podcast will drop next, within a week, but, we have Columbus Day Duels, which started in 2010 with only 16 teams and 8 mats. And this year we're at a couple hundred teams and we're going to run 92 mats this year. So, and then we've also partnered up with the National Wrestling Officials Association that's hosting their conference at the tournament as well. But you and your team are going to come out. We're going to have you guys speak at the conference for the officials. We're going to have you speak at the coaches meeting, and then you're going to have your booth set up for all couple hundred teams. Everybody in attendance will be able to stop by and check you out. So I know as the owner of Tyrant Wrestling, we want to do business with good people and good businesses. So we're excited to partner with you, and hopefully that'll be a great partnership for years to come. And I'll take it another step further. I know in our initial conversation, it's not just athletes. Right away I said to you, hey, can you do mindset coaching with the people that work for me and myself? So I understand the value of it, and I look forward to the partnership, and I look forward to getting to know you better personally as well. So I appreciate everything you've done so far, and I look forward to working with you, Gene. Thank you so much.
Us too. Thanks a lot, Corey. Thank you for everything.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.